So today's lecture video, or this week's lecture video, is going to be about composing instruction sets, instruction manuals. We're going to be looking at examples of really badly composed instruction sets. From my experience, anytime I'm in a course like this, or any kind of like math course or science course, I see a lot of like great examples of things, but I never really see many examples of bad, materials. So what we're going to look at this week, we're going to look at a few really poorly constructed instruction sets. We're going to talk about what good instruction sets look like. We're going to talk about what goes in them, how they can be effective, and then we'll move into a bit of a topic that I think is important to consider when testing not just a product, but how that product is effectively communicated to a user. So we're going to be looking at a concept called usability testing. So let's dive right into it. All right. Instruction sets or manuals are really kind of an important topic, not just in terms of really understanding the genre of giving instructions or writing these kinds of documents, but really when we understand how we can explain something to somebody efficiently and effectively, those skill sets transfer in many, many different ways into different realms of technical writing. So I really find that the instruction set for this class is really just a venue for exploring the larger skills that we can import into other ways of thinking about it. So here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about instruction sets, obviously. We'll be talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, what they kind of look like, and then finally we're going to close out with usability testing and what that means and how that might apply to your work with giving instructions, or if you're planning on composing an instruction set for your final project, it would be good to pay attention to that part for that reason as well. So here we go. Moving into this, I always ask this question in class, but I think it's just as important to kind of bring it to your mind here. If anyone has fallen victim to a poorly written, constructed, or designed manual, I think it's important to think about why those documents failed you. The example I have is when I bought a gas barbecue grill a few years ago, and I got it home. Well, the story goes like this. I got the wild idea to buy a gas grill and then the next day have a barbecue pit. So at around 11 p.m. one night, I went to Walmart and bought a gas grill. Not a very good one, a pretty cheap one actually. And I brought it home and I opened up the box and I laid out all the parts in front of me and I said, okay, I'm going to put this together. And it said, the instructions said, estimated assembly time 1 hour. So I was like, all right, cool, I can get this. I can be in bed by midnight, wake up the next day, start barbecuing, have some friends over. But the instructions, it turned out, were so poorly put together. It took me about 5 or 6 hours, and I didn't get to bed till about 6 a.m. So, yeah, it wasn't really a successful instruction manual. And when I started looking at the manual in retrospect, it was because a lot of things were labeled poorly. The illustrations were not clear. The text instructions were just absolutely terrible. There was a lot of ambiguous theys and its and that's that couldn't really make sense, So I think we've all had an example in our lives of something like this at one point or another, and especially if you haven't yet, I'm sure you will. So I always like to throw it out there. What do you think makes an instruction set bad? It might be the language, it might be the illustrations, it might be the design of the document. Because if one thing is true about instruction sets, it's that the design of the actual document is just as important as what the text tells us and what the information and the content is. So for example, look at this right here. This is some of you might find this a little bit familiar. We have here pretty much a manual on how to work a Comcast remote, but really if you've operated any kind of universal remote, this is probably something you've dealt with in the past before. So a remote like this, or a manual like this that tells you how to use the remote, I find them incredibly infuriating. We know that it's designed this way in this particular format because it needs to be folded up and put into the packaging with the remote, but if you look at how the the manual is really kind of laid out, it becomes really difficult to easily navigate, to intuitively find information you're looking for. I say it creates a sense of kind of like textual vertigo in a way. You know, you don't really know what you're looking for. There are headings, but the headings aren't really, wonderfully clear. So, I really think that a manual like this is often, I don't know, just kind of a bit overwhelming in some ways. So if we were to redesign this, how would we do it? We could have a conversation like that in a discussion board perhaps. But I think what I would do is I would try to take out the kind of vertical formatting here, and I would probably try to come up with a way that would be more intuitive for readers to easily find information. Also, of course, if you've ever dealt with one of these manuals, when you fold it out, it becomes like a gigantic map, and it's not a very navigatable map. So I would probably try to change the physical attributes of the manual as well. Let's look at this here. This is a toy helicopter, and if we see here, it's something that the kids will assemble or the users will assemble, and we have the parts that are labeled here. They're numbered, okay, and that's fine. I think even if the numbers are a little bit out of order or a little bit ambiguous, we can probably deal with this. We could probably put it together. But when we look at the final product, it's a little messy. So just easily snap all these pieces into place. But it gets a little messy here. Like, look right here. Let me kind of zoom in. So if we look at here, parts 18, 19, and 20, they kind of crisscross. We don't really know where it's going to where. It's really difficult to figure out. And you could probably, figure it out if you're looking at it. But the whole point of an instruction manual is to save time and to make things easy for the user. And I really just find something like this to be really infuriating. So again, there's no text here. And some manuals do really well without text. I think Lego does an amazing job without putting text in their manuals. IKEA, who actually gets a pretty bad rep for their instruction sets, I think overall their instruction manuals have gotten a lot better over the years, and they've actually produced some pretty wonderful technical materials. I've been buying furniture from IKEA for a couple of years now, and I haven't had too much problem with any of their stuff, so it's been okay. But yeah, you can see how this would really infuriate somebody. It's just not a very good instruction set, not very well done at all. Right. Let me just kind of zoom past this here. So that's something I want to point out, is the quality of any instruction manual is only measured by one thing, and that is the manual's usefulness to the user. If we have a manual that people can't use, it might as well not even exist. It doesn't really have a purpose. So that's just something to remember here, that just like with almost every kind of technical writing, especially when giving instructions, it's a very selfless process. It has nothing to do with the writer. It has everything to do with the user. So I just want to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward here. So when does content or some sort of process call for a manual to be written? Well, there's a handful of reasons there. One is when there's a best or right or most efficient way of completing something, we usually need a manual to guide users into that direction, especially if those ways are not obvious from the get-go. We also usually need some sort of instruction manual or set when there is a policy or law put into place, and that's to make sure that policy or law is followed down to a T. Also, when other methods leave room for failure. Sometimes there are multiple ways to do something, but other methods actually are less effective and may not even be, correct. So we have to do that. And especially here, of course, when the user has little knowledge. I had no idea how to put this gas barbecue pit together. I needed someone to tell me, and of course they kind of dropped the ball. So some of these are very obvious, but it's kind of nice to see that in print there. So the quality of instructions measured by the usefulness. So therefore, there's some things that kind of like laws here I want to put into effect. One is the manufacturer's intentions for the use and care of the product must be accurate and clearly written, of course. Specific instructions must be arranged in logically ordered steps that the reader can easily follow. That doesn't necessarily mean chronologically, but it does mean logically. So there's a difference between those two things. Explanations of steps must be concisely written and relevant to the reader's point of view. That means, of course, you're paying attention to audience, you're paying attention to how a reader would decode something versus the way you might encode something. Sometimes those can be the same, hopefully. Sometimes those can be very different. Language should be simple and direct. Nothing too jargony, nothing too conflated, nothing too inflated. And of course, the format should be allowing kind of like ready access to key information. So the format of the document should be intuitive. It should be easy to follow. It should almost be kind of predictive. The reader should be able to guess what's coming next based on what they're reading currently. So I'm not going to go through all of this because in the reading for this week, the guide on instruction manuals, I cover all of these things. But just to give you kind of a thorough overview of the components of an instruction manual, usually instruction manuals, especially in technical fields, they're busted up into 3 parts. One is the front matter. These include things like the cover page, the title page, special warnings, table of contents, things like that. Then we have the body, and that is the actual instructions, and that can include lots of different things. One of the most important things on that list, I think, is actually the unpacking instructions. Sometimes we need to unpack materials from their boxes in really specific ways so that we understand where parts are or maybe set ourselves up for success later. So these are things that are all just kind of throughout there. Of course, the back matter, any appendices, anything about part replacement, other background data that might be necessary, a glossary, stuff like that. Now, normally if we were in class, I would go over these in a lot of detail. I'll go over some key kind of, parts I want us to pay attention to because really all of these things are covered very thoroughly in the reading for this week. So just be sure to do that. The front matter here, we're talking about front matter. Of course, the cover usually has the title of the document, obviously, the name of the organization issuing the manual. There's usually an organization logo on there, and there sometimes is a photograph of the product. Right. A title page will cover various data. Usually has a lot to do with copyright. Usually some sort of descriptive title, things like that. And then, of course, we have in the front matter, this is very important, we have things like safety hazards, updates on old procedures, maybe there's been some revisions since the last version of the product, any kind of legal disclaimers, things like that. So we're talking about stuff like, if you're cleaning a hot stove, make sure you're wearing, thick protective gloves. You'd be surprised how lawsuits can pop up when things aren't put into place effectively. So if you've ever heard the term CYA, stands for cover your ass, this is the kind of stuff that goes in that section. Right. And of course, there's usually a preface or a summary, usually just kind of like general purpose of the instructions, what they're going to be doing, things like that. So and then, of course, in the body, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there. There's usually an introduction to the section. Again, I'm not going to go over this kind of stuff, but if you want to pause and read through all of this information is in the reading this week, too. Usually description of the equipment or how it's operated. There's usually unpacking instructions, which is kind of nice. I think those are very, very good. Sorry for the not very well centered there. Wow. Sorry. Usually assembly or setup process instructions, usually operating procedures, and again, this is all in the reading, so do be sure to read through that. And of course, there's a troubleshooting section, and I usually like this. Troubleshooting sections, I think, are logically organized into 3 parts, usually symptoms, causes, and remedies. I like that because you can kind of diagnose it, you can find out what's causing it, and then you can fix it. So I do appreciate that format when good instruction manuals use it. Let's see here. Back matter, usually there's some sort of appendices in terms of like explanation of terms, or if people need to replace parts, there might be figures and drawings in these sections. And of course, they are usually other possible elements. There might be blank pages for people to take notes on. I always use it for notes. Any references, if they're needed, there's usually a back cover. Right. So almost always almost always, instruction manuals will narrowly define the method in which something can be completed. And I think that's really important. Kind of like over the struggle of defining technical writing from our Dobrin and Allen readings. When we apply a definition or boundaries around something, we narrowly define what that thing is or how that process can be completed. And it's kind of really no different here. When we talk about the best way to change a tire on a car, we are narrowly defining the methods in which we think is the best way to do that. So we're saying that all other methods aren't as good as this method that we're explaining to the user right now. So I think it's important then to point out here that we need to find a balance between the expertise of the writer, your expertise as a technical expert, and the lack of expertise of the reader. And we pay attention to that in a few ways. We pay attention to that in terms of like language and design of the information, all sorts of different ways. And one major way we can do that, I'm sorry, I kind of jumped ahead of myself here, but we're going to talk about usability testing in a second. But one major way we can do that is usability testing. We'll talk about that in just a second. So think about this. We usually think about interacting directly with the document, but really what we need to be doing. So let me jump in here. What we usually do here is we usually think in these terms. How can I interact with this document? But what we need to be thinking about is this. How can I have the reader interact with the document? That is a more efficient way of making sure readers' needs are met. So we need to think about a few levels here. What are the intentions of the writer? What can we do to kind of think like the reader? And then how can we use language of the reader, the language of the reader, to kind of promote this sense of predictive reading? In other words, we want the reader to feel as if moving through these instructions is something that can be done efficiently and to make them feel good about what they're doing. If someone can finish a process, we can really, and with little to no problems, they can feel good about what they've done, and they'll probably feel more confident about using the product itself. So how does a technical writer measure predictive reading? How do they measure the success of the intent of the writer? I think one way to do that is usability testing. So usability testing usually happens in things like focus groups and other kinds of product-related testing measures. So, for example, here we have a guy who's watching someone else use a computer on a TV, and they're just mad because, of course, they're saying that's not how you're supposed to use it, So, but I think more practically here, we think about it this way. So we have let's say a gas barbecue pit, and let's say someone from that company was in the room with me while I was putting that barbecue pit together. They might take notes over where I get hung up on certain processes in the process of putting things together. They might have revisions they note that they need to make to their own document. So, let me back up. What I'm kind of talking about here is not just revising the product or something about the product, although that certainly happens with usability testing. I'm talking about revising and making revisions to writing about the product. So let's say you have your instruction manual on how to change a flat tire, and you give it to your friend. And then, so here you have a prototype. You have your first draft of this tire repair manual. And then you give that manual to your friend, and they attempt to fix a flat tire. And then you watch them very closely go through the steps of that manual and actually fixing the tire. And then you realize, well, there are certain places that they did very well, and there are certain places they didn't do very well. So you go up and you make revisions to that document. And then you repeat the process. You send them through the process again. You make revisions. And eventually, you end up with something that is a well-composed document that meets the needs of the user, that makes the process efficient, that helps them be effective at what they do, and makes them feel good about it. So that's what usability testing is. If you are doing an instruction set for your final project, I highly, highly recommend doing this. Although with technical reports or with digital content, you can certainly do the same thing. You can send someone to your written material. You can watch them read through it, watch them, and talk to them about it. What went well, what didn't go well, and you can make revisions that way too. So think about it this way: we have an observation room. We have some people, app designers, who are you're watching someone use a phone, right? So here they have they're in an observation room. They're watching a camera, which is watching the person, and then they have a computer that's hooked up to the phone. And here they get to watch not just how that person uses that phone or that app, but they get to watch the person's reactions to it. So they can gather all sorts of different information from this usability testing setup, and I think it's quite good. So think about that. Think about how you might employ something like this with your final projects. I think it's incredibly useful. So that is it. That is it. Read through the instruction manual readings for this week. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoy putting together your instruction set. I think it's actually a pretty fun activity to do, a pretty fun assignment, and you can learn a lot from doing it. So dive right in. Let me know if you have questions about anything. Have a good day.